Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and hard to get a more impressive guest than we have today.
Well, indeed, Jeff Hickman, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the state of Oklahoma, is going to join us today. He's an awfully busy guy, and we've had to kind of pry him out of the Capitol for a couple of hours to come out and talk to us about what's going on out at the Capitol. Needless to say, this time of year, there's a lot going on.
Speaker Hickman, today's guest on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
I've been fortunate enough to premiere every film that I've produced at Sundance. Seeing your film on the big screen for the first time in front of an audience at the Sundance Film Festival is unmatched. I'm Chad Burris. I'm an attorney, a film producer, film financier, economic development financier, and I'm Chickasaw. Nobody can argue that modern day media, cinema, has perpetuated this myth, this idea of the Indian and what that is. And just the idea that, all Indians look one way or all Indians act one way is a terrible injustice. Being able to have filmmakers tell stories that are representative of some element of his surroundings, his upbringing, what they know, what they see through their own eyes, that other people get a chance to bear witness to around the world. I think that's amazing. For me personally, being an Indian today means being responsible, honest, progressive, and giving that back to the community.
Learn more about today's Chickasaws at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
As we indicated in the opening segment, we're really pleased today to welcome to the set of The Verdict the Honorable Jeff Hickman, the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the state of Oklahoma. Very busy this time of year. Jeff did his undergraduate work in journalism at the University of Oklahoma. He's from northwestern Oklahoma and was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2004. He was elected to serve as Speaker in 2012. And has served as Speaker Pro Tem and then Speaker since that time. He will be term limiting it out this session, at the end of this session. And we're really pleased to welcome you. It's good to see you and good to have you on The Verdict.
Oh, thanks, kid. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Our image from the outside is that it just must be very hectic as you get into the final month of the session. Is that accurate?
It is. It's very busy. There's a lot going on at the Capitol. It has been really almost since adjournment last year. We knew we were going into this oil bust. Last year we had $611 million less to spend than we did the year prior, and we knew this year might be worse, and indeed it is. And so a lot of budget work, budget planning. I set up several different task forces to look at different options in terms of our budget process, everything from tax credits to revenue enhancements, going through revolving funds. We've got a working group on virtually every aspect of the budget, and we have since before session started. So really probably more work than I've ever seen in my 12 years on the budget that's going on. And so a lot of work. It will all kind of come together in the next few weeks as we try to wrap up the session before the last Friday in May with the constitutional deadline. But obviously some real challenges when you have $1.3 billion less to spend than we did last year. Some very real challenges.
There's a perception that the oil and gas industry and the downslide of prices is the driving force. What percentage actually would you say is that the cause of the legislative shortfall?
Oh, I would say probably 90% at least of the situation is what we're seeing in the economy. And Oklahomans are feeling it. When you have over 15,000 jobs lost in the energy sector alone, that's 15,000 of our friends and neighbors and family members that don't have jobs. Those are people that don't have income tax taken out of their check every month now. Those are people that don't have the money to go buy a new car or pickup. They're not buying things to generate sales tax only for the state, but for cities and counties as well. When you have 15,000 people that were making good money in the oil field suddenly out of work, it has a dramatic impact on the entire economy of the state in every area of our tax collections. And again, last month, we lost over 5,000 jobs, just last month, non-farm jobs in Oklahoma, another 5,000 jobs that were lost. So it's a very challenging time in the history of our state.
Any reliable predictions on, have we hit bottom yet? Are we seeing a turnaround yet in the oil and gas sector?
Well, I think the prices are back up a little bit, and they're kind of stabilizing. They're not swinging as much as they were. Our revenues I think maybe have kind of bottomed out. We're seeing last month the collections had kind of stabilized. So hopefully hopefully we've seen the worst of this, and that we'll begin pulling out of it. But you never know, and so many of these things are out of our control in the energy market. I mean, there's just it's not only the rest of the country, but it's the rest of the world now that's in that market, and there are things that can happen in other parts of the world that impact this that we have no control over. So it really is challenging, and that's why it's so important to look at diversifying our economy. And Oklahoma City has obviously been a leader in doing that as well, but we're still an oil state. We're still very much tied to the oil industry and the jobs that it creates because of the resources we have here. And so it's important to continue to diversify, but we also realize that the oil industry is really a key to our economy here in Oklahoma, still is.
We see a lot pluses and minuses about the wisdom or lack thereof of incentives to bring business in. The incentives presumably hurt revenue, at least for a period of time, with the expectation that it would be made up through progress. Do you see any further erosion on the existing incentives coming out of this session, or are we pretty well locked into what we've got now, and that's probably what we're going to have for a year or so? No,
I think you'll see some reforms in the next few weeks that will come out to address some of the tax credit programs that we have. But the biggest challenge that we have, and it's just amazing to me, but we've been there 12 years, and Representative David Dank, the late Representative Dank from here in Oklahoma City, began this journey. I've traveled the state with him in public hearings to look at and talk about tax credits. It really has been a long-term journey, and the amazing thing to me is that we did not have a mechanism in place to provide legislators with information on the return on investment. How much is the tax credit costing the state, but how much is it creating in a positive economic benefit, generating revenue for the state? We've never had that information. Last year, finally, we passed a bill that set up an incentive review commission, and they're currently reviewing all of the tax credits and incentives in the state. They'll review all credits over 4 years, so a fourth of the credits every year over 4 years. And that information will be provided to the legislature. For the first time ever, we'll have reports on the return on investment on every tax credit that the state has on the books. And at that point, legislators can make a decision. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of one. They will have the information to make an educated decision. And it may be that there's something we're incentivizing that's important to the state that may be costing us more money than it's generating, but it's something that's important to our state to have. And so they'll have the information to know this is costing us money, but we're going to continue that credit because that's a very important issue for the state of Oklahoma. And on the flip side, there may be things that clearly are costing us far more than they're worth. And legislators will finally, for the first time ever in the history of our state, have the information to make informed decisions about tax credits. I think that's the biggest reform of the last several years that will have long-term effects on the state of Oklahoma.
And how will that report, or who will generate that report?
Well, there's a commission that's been appointed. It's been appointments obviously by the House Speaker and the Senate Pro Tem and the Governor, and they just began their work at the end of the calendar year. All of the members were appointed. I appointed a private investigator from here in Oklahoma City as my appointee. There are economic development people, other budget leaders. There aren't any legislators that serve on that commission, but all outside experts, economists and others. And I think it really is a blue ribbon panel that will, I think, provide us great information. They're doing great work. We'll have that information going into the next legislative session.
Well, how significant an impediment to diversification of the economy is a ratcheting back or doing away with incentives to bring new business in?
Well, I think it's something you have to be mindful of, and it's not just even incentives, it's also on exemptions and other things. There's a sales tax exemption for airlines and railroads That's the exemption, and it costs us about $60 million a year, but that's the exemption that keeps American Airlines maintenance facility in Tulsa. I mean, it's a very critical exemption. It's something we looked at several months ago. We were looking at all of the exemptions, and obviously that one at $60 million got our attention. But when we checked with the Department of Commerce and the Cabinet Secretary in Commerce, we found out very quickly several months ago that's a key incentive. That exemption is a key to keep American Airlines there. And can you imagine if Tulsa didn't have that American Airlines facility, what it would not only mean to Tulsa, but the economy of our state and the revenues of our state. So there are things like that we have to look at and be very mindful of because that's the world we live in. It's competitive. Other states have credits and incentives. That's just the game that's being played. And so until unilaterally every other state drops incentive programs, we have to figure out how we're in the game to recruit jobs as well. But we want to make sure that we're doing it in the right way and that we're doing it in a way that works and generates a positive benefit for the taxpayers of Oklahoma.
I know cities and counties would love to see some of the sales tax exemptions go away. Do you think that's likely to happen?
You know, we're looking at some of those. I don't know that that's as likely to happen as perhaps looking at some services and adding, broadening the base. There's some talk about raising the sales tax rate, but I think a lot of legislators would be more interested in maybe keeping the rate where it is because we already have one of the highest sales taxes in the country. But broadening to some additional items that cities and counties in the state, obviously once the state starts taxing a service, then a city or county would be able to do that.
Right.
Those are things we're looking at. There are services that are surrounding bordering states tax already, and we're looking at those to see, what is it that the majority of our neighbors tax. Obviously you don't want a competitive disadvantage, particularly for our border counties, but we're looking at those things, which would be additional revenue for cities and counties as well. So we're looking at exemptions. Those are all challenging because every one of them has constituency, but we have about $8 billion in sales tax exemptions. That's the state cost, and so probably about $8 billion that's cities and counties also don't receive as well. But about half of that is the exemption for resale. When you're building a widget, you don't pay tax on the steel or the glue or whatever it is because the widget ultimately is taxed. And so about $4 billion of that aid is sales for resale. Things like agriculture, the loaf of bread is taxed, so you don't pay on the fertilizer, or the steak is taxed, so you don't pay on the feed for the cattle. There's things like that are in there that are big sections, but obviously there's a lot of other smaller ones too. But I think there's probably far more talk going on at the Capitol about looking at services, particularly things that 4, 5, 6, 7 of our bordering states tax that we don't currently tax, and obviously that would have a great impact for cities and counties as well if we go down that road.
Absolutely. Let's take a break. Jeff Hickman, the Speaker of the House, is our guest today. We'll have more right after this.
Clean air, water, and land. Abundant American energy. You don't have to choose one or the other. Because for Oklahoma and America's future, both matter. That's why Oklahoma's oil and natural gas producers share valuable 3D seismic data with regulators and scientists, leading to better views of Oklahoma's diverse geology and more insights into protecting our land. Learn more about these efforts at oerb.com/bothmatter.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the set of the verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers and our guest, Speaker Jeff Hickman.
Mr. Speaker, we in the general public hear from time to time thoughts or comments that perhaps the structure of our legislative session ought to change from doing both policy and budget matters every year to, of course, doing budget matters every year, and then doing every other year policy matters. How does that hit your process? What do you think about that?
I think, particularly with what we're going through right now, with this, this crisis in our economy, issues we're dealing with in healthcare and education and other things, I'm concerned that to tie our hands and say you can't address everything you need to, whether it's policy or budget in any given year, might be challenging for us.
Well,
because
doesn't policy oftentimes affect budget?
It does. It absolutely does.
How you make that clear
There's
division.
very few policies that don't have a cost one way or another, and so it does have an impact. We could do that. There's been talk about a state question or a constitutional change to do that. That's not necessary. The House and Senate could tomorrow decide we're not taking up any more policy bills this session. We'll only do it every other year and put it in our joint rules between the House and Senate. And then if it didn't work, it would be easy to change that again. But it really, I don't know that it's necessary. The focus of that argument has always been on, it really would put more focus on the budget. Members would do more work on the budget. But I think particularly in the House, with what we've done this year with our working groups and more work than ever in our history of working on the budget before session started, our members are engaged in a way I've never seen before, but they're also taking care of the policy matters. There were fewer bills filed, so it naturally took care of itself as the focus turned more on the budget and the challenges we have in the economy. So there were fewer policy bills that were filed and fewer that have moved through the process than normal. But I think the House has proven this year that we can take care of policy issues at the same time. We're more focused than ever on addressing the budget needs. So I sure don't think it's something that needs to be in the Constitution, but obviously a conversation that will continue.
Talk about healthcare for a moment. I have people that are in the healthcare industry that are very concerned about the legislation and how it's going to be handled. Oh,
I'm very concerned as well. I think the most critical issue that we face in the next few weeks to deal with at the legislature is the issue on healthcare and the crisis at many of our hospitals and nursing homes. Not just in rural communities, but even impacting. I've talked to many of the executives at the bigger hospitals in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. It is a real struggle, particularly for our Medicaid program, and our urban hospitals treat a lot of patients that are Medicaid recipients. Our rural hospitals disproportionately treat a higher percentage of their patients that are Medicaid. So when you have reductions to the Healthcare Authority budget that impact provider rates, what we're able to pay doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, mental health services. The Oklahoma County Jail is the largest mental health facility in the state. About 400 inmates there that are in need of mental health services, but we really don't have those services available because they're not insured. They don't have access to private care. That is talk about a real crisis that's facing us as a state that we have to address, I believe, in the next few weeks. It's the issue of health care and our Medicaid program, one of the fastest growing areas of our budget. We have a plan to be considered, hopefully, by the legislature. Obviously, as you mentioned, Kent, a lot of policy issues are tied to budget, and this is one of those. It's a critical policy issue, but it's going to cost money to implement this plan. But we have a plan that it's not Medicaid expansion that other states have done as part of the federal health care law. In fact, many of our neighboring states have seen their costs grow. When they've done the Medicaid expansion, it's cost them more than what they anticipated. That is not something we can do in Oklahoma for financial reasons. We can't afford to go down that path. We actually have a plan that does just the opposite. It will remove 175,000 people off of Medicaid onto private insurance. Private insurance where they'll have better health outcomes. So by moving them from Medicaid to private insurance, they'll have better health outcomes. They'll be healthier, which is a real positive for those recipients as well. We also will take 175,000 people that currently don't have insurance in Oklahoma and move them to our very successful Insure Oklahoma program that's been in place for small businesses for a long, long time here in Oklahoma. A very successful program, one that people are very supportive of. And so we would move 175,000 people off of Medicaid, so not a Medicaid expansion, just the opposite, ultimately saves the state $700 million long term, moves those citizens to private insurance, better health outcomes, and then we insure 175,000 Oklahomans that are currently uninsured through Insure Oklahoma and stabilize the provider rates for all of our hospitals and physicians and nursing homes and others. That's a very real issue. When you start talking about nursing homes, it's not only access to the care in those communities around the state, but it's also the jobs. When you think about the jobs, particularly in smaller communities that hospitals or nursing homes provide, if a nursing home closes or a hospital closes, not only do you lose the health care option locally, you lose very good jobs in your communities, particularly in rural communities. To have a large employer close would be devastating. So a very critical issue we face.
There's an impression that we're leaving some federal money on the table when it comes to health care. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. But there's a couple of different pots of money there. There is a Medicaid expansion pot of federal money that's available. If you expand Medicaid, you qualify for that. You don't have to do anything. You just expand Medicaid and you can get that money. This plan, obviously, because we're going just the opposite, will require us to get approval for a different pot of federal money. But it is federal money that Oklahomans send to Washington that doesn't come back. We do, get a lot of money back for roads and bridges, and we do have other matching money for our Medicaid program already. So this is money that's been there. It's just rerouted through the federal health care law now. It's separate than the Medicaid expansion money, and again, it would require us to get approval of our plan from the federal government to qualify for those dollars. But there's a significant amount, several $100 million, that does not come into the state because we haven't addressed this issue. We believe this Oklahoma plan, developed by Oklahomans, using our Insure Oklahoma plan locally and moving people off of Medicaid, not only is fiscally responsible for the state, but it'll provide better health outcomes for those Oklahomans that were able to provide better insurance.
If we have ever had a rainy day, this is it from a budget standpoint. And I know we have a constitutionally created rainy day fund, but the deposits into that are not unlimited, and I'm sure we've used some money in the past from it. Where do we stand on solving some of our budget problem with rainy day fund money?
Sure. There are funds available. We used some a month or so ago. We sent $51 million to our schools to offset some of the revenue failure to schools, which, again, education is our top priority. It's where we spend the majority of our money. 51% of the state budget is spent on education when you look at higher ed, career tech, and our pre-K through 12th grade schools. 34% alone goes to pre-K through 12th grade schools. So it is an incredible priority, and that's why the education, common education, and corrections were the only two entities to receive dollars from the rainy day fund to help stabilize the current year budget. Obviously, we have a crisis in our state prisons as well, and they don't have the revenue even to make it through the end of the year. And so those were the two critical areas. So we've used some of that money. We used a little bit last year. We probably will use some additional, I don't know if it'll be another $100 million or what it might be, but we're also concerned about next year. So you want to leave a little bit in that fund for next year as well. There's also been some talk at the Capitol of expanding that cap to put we just did that a few years back to put more money in to the rainy day fund, but maybe lifting that cap or making it a little higher so more money could be set aside. And there's also talk about an energy stabilization fund where some of the gross production tax dollars in good times when the oil price is higher would be set aside in a special fund to really kind of smooth out these peaks and valleys we have in revenue. So those dollars would be set aside in a stabilization fund, and when you hit an oil bust or something like this happens, those dollars could be deployed as well. So a lot of conversations about how we position ourselves for when this happens again. We know we're an oil state, and we know you're going to have booms and busts. When you get elected to the legislature, you hope the bust doesn't happen while you're there. And when you get elected speaker, you really hope the bust doesn't happen while you're there. But that's where we are, and we know that as a state, and hopefully we'll be better for it when we come out on the other side. You and a lot of your colleagues will be term limiting out this session. Political future for you? No, not a political future for me. I've served 12 years. It's been a tremendous honor to represent my district in northwest Oklahoma, Woodward, Woods, Alfalfa, and major counties in northwest Oklahoma, and an incredible honor to get to serve as Speaker of the House. Something that I never dreamed as a farm kid growing up in northwest Oklahoma or a college kid at OU that I'd be sitting here as Speaker of the House. I never had planned even to run for office until the point that I did. But 12 years is long enough. Particularly our legislators that don't live here in the metro area and don't get to go home every night, you miss a lot of things with your children. 12 years is a long time. Kids grow up and you miss things with your spouse, and so I hope I paid my debt to society. But I think maybe a 12-year sentence is long enough, and I'm ready to go back to the other side and enjoy my family and spend some more time back on the farm and in the middle of nowhere in the peace and quiet. We have run out of time, but I hope even when you're not Speaker, you'll entertain coming back on the verdict, and we'd love to have your thoughts. I'd love to. Thanks so much for the invitation. This is a great show. I always enjoy watching. A fine legislative career, 12 years winding up for Speaker of the House Jeff Hickman. Kent and I'll have a final word right after this.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here. I drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we've tried to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We are wrapping up a show with Speaker of the House, Jeff Hickman.
Yeah, it's a testament to his openness and willingness to let the people of Oklahoma know what's going on at the Capitol that he would give us this time in the ultra busy schedule that he's got. And we got an awful lot of good information, just didn't have enough time on this show to explore many things we'd like to have, but he's ending his service on a high note. And we're pleased to have him on our show at this time of the year.
He was first elected in 2004. That was the first year that term limits went into effect. And so there were a lot of positions that came up, and so it's going to be a big turnover heading into next year, a lot of new faces. Website information, more information on the speaker at okhouse.gov. And we have a website, theverdict.tv. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time on The Verdict.